Imagine waking up and realizing the rules that structured your life. Gods, nations, careers, causes, the moral grammar you learned as a child, are not revealed truths but fragile inventions. Imagine seeing without flinching that every because you rely on can be answered with a blank stare. Why this value? Why this fear? Why this death? That moment of lucid vertigo is the opening of nihilism. It feels like falling through floorboards into a cold, brilliant void. For some it becomes liberation, for others it becomes poison. For thinkers who want precision, depth and moral honesty, nihilism is both the most dangerous diagnosis and the most honest diagnosis we can make. Below is a long, unflinching guide to nihilism, its varieties, its history, the dangerous social currents it rides, shocking real-world consequences, and practical reflections, especially for high IQ minds, on how to face, neutralize, or even transform it into creative power. Expect sharp questions, uncomfortable truths, and concrete mental tools. Nihilism is not simply sadness, cynicism, or casual sarcasm. It's a philosophical diagnosis, the conviction that there are no inherent meanings, no ultimate values, no objective moral law, or that those frameworks have collapsed. That basic claim can show up in many guises. Existential nihilism. Life has no intrinsic meaning. Moral nihilism. There are no objective moral facts. Right and wrong are human-made. Epistemological nihilism. Knowledge itself is impossible or deeply unreliable. Political nihilism. Existing institutions are illegitimate and should be destroyed. Crucial correction. Nihilism is not automatically despair. There's a difference between passive nihilism, which collapses into apathy and resignation, and active nihilism, the radical clearing of the table so you can build new values. Nietzsche called for the latter, face the abyss, then create. If there is no cosmic scoreboard, why are you still keeping score? Two slow shocks made nihilism thinkable as a social phenomenon, the death of certainty. Scientific cosmology, secular history, and textual criticism showed that traditional authorities, scriptures, monarchs, mythic origin stories, were neither infallible nor metaphysically privileged. When your map loses its divine guarantee, navigation gets harder. The erosion of meta-narratives. Enlightenment rationalism, industrialism, and modern bureaucratic life replaced sacred story with systems and markets. As old sacred meanings eroded, nothing obvious replaced them. Nietzsche saw this coming and coined the brutal phrase, "God is dead." He meant the last universally compelling source of meaning was collapsing. He knew the result could be chaos or creative rebirth. History shows both. The 20th century's ideological void helped fuel revolutions, genocides, and totalitarian mass movements alongside new art, existential thought, and secular moral reform. Shocking reality without melodrama. When deep meaning collapses for entire communities, the psychological vacancy frequently fills with something coarser: mass ideology, consumer distraction, tribal rage. The 20th century's biggest catastrophes did not occur in a moral vacuum by accident. They emerged where shared meaning had been weaponized or where nihilistic despair met charismatic cruelty. Reflective prompt. If your society lost its shared stories tomorrow, what would you build first? Nihilism isn't a monolith. Understanding its flavors helps us diagnose what we're facing. Passive nihilism, apathy, boredom, last man comfort. You numb out, seek pleasure, and avoid risk. Nietzsche called this the worst kind, a spiritual atrophy masquerading as happiness. Despairing nihilism. Suffering is everywhere. life is net negative. This is close to Schopenhauer's pessimism or certain readings of Buddhism. Disoriented nihilism. You cling to old values because the new ones aren't convincing. Religion gives comfort, but feels hollow. An anxious limbo. Active nihilism. You demolish old idols deliberately to create new values. Nietzsche's revaluation of all values. Hard, rare, and creative. Micro-experiment. Try it. For 1 week, write down, daily, one thing you believed was given that you now doubt. Then for each, propose a small, concrete practice that could replace it. High intelligence is double-edged. You see patterns and contradictions sooner. That's a gift and a liability. Clarity becomes corrosive. Spotting inconsistencies in sacred stories, social narratives, or personal commitments can be exhilarating and then hollowing. The intellect detects the falseness of the scaffolding before the heart can accept new supports. Meta-awareness breeds paralysis. If every justification can itself be interrogated, decisive action gets harder. The smarter you are at deconstructing, the more tempting it is to stop constructing. Value skepticism becomes aesthetic. Highly analytic minds can master an elegant critique of meaning and then admire their own demolition, aestheticizing despair. Do you deconstruct because you want to understand, or because you secretly prefer being the critic? We live in a culture that accelerates emptying. Social media gives endless symbolic affirmation without depth. Consumer capitalism offers dopamine patches instead of durable projects. Atomizing institutions leave people without durable communities. The result? Passive nihilism becomes contagious. People can broadcast their emptiness and make it fashionable. Meme culture valorizes irony and detachment, a social contagion of the nothing matters stance, often without the courage of active nihilism's constructive edge. Optimistic nihilism, the meme-friendly slogan that life is meaningless, but hey, we might as well party, is soothing on the surface and dangerous at scale. Without practices that translate freedom from meaning into responsibility, it risks becoming a cultural anesthetic. Nihilism isn't just private angst. It scales. When meaning collapses, violence becomes thinkable. If there are no fixed values, then killing, purging, or clearing may be rationalized as creating space for new order. Historically, revolutions and extremist movements have exploited this vacancy. When old moral anchors die, opportunists harvest the confusion. Charismatic leaders promise new narratives and direct the existential anger outward towards scapegoats, enemies, or utopian projects. When many feel nothing matters, civic care erodes. Institutions depend on citizens who care enough to sustain them. Without shared value, public goods degrade. Notice your political anger. Is it anchored to a constructive project, or is it a response to personal meaninglessness projected outward? Nietzsche diagnosed the death of God, urged the creative response, Übermensch, will to power, eternal recurrence. He insisted we must affirm life and make meaning. Camus embraced the absurd but refused despair. He urged revolt, living with lucidity and rebellion. Sisyphus made heroic by acceptance. Sartre condemned to be free. With no preordained essence, you must choose, and choose responsibly. Schopenhauer Buddhist Echo saw existence as suffering. Escape is possible through negation or detachment. Postmodernists, Foucault, Lyotard, deconstructed meta-narratives, exposing power structures but sometimes leaving a vacuum. Which of these responses feels most honest to you? Creation, revolt, acceptance, or escape? thought experiments that expose your implicit values. If you must choose to save either a stranger or your pet, what do you choose? Why? What does that reveal about your moral architecture? Suppose you must live this life exactly as it is for eternity, Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. Would you be horrified or would you embrace it? If horrified, what change would bring your answer closer to embrace? Imagine a life where comfort is maximal, challenge minimal, and risk absent. You have no higher projects. After 10 years, are you fulfilled? These experiments are not tricks, they are probes. High IQ readers, take them seriously and journal answers, not to prove a philosophical point, but to locate the origin of your commitments. If the abyss is real, how do you act without illusion? Here's a toolbox, concrete, cognitive, and ethical, constrained to create self-imposed limits. Freedom without constraint is a playground. Choose boundaries, a craft, a daily ritual, a relationship covenant. Constraints force coherence. Adopt an aesthetic of values. Niestche make values as an artist makes art. Choose high-quality projects that are sensorial, ethical, and demanding, not because they're true in a cosmic sense, but because they refine your life. Practice small fidelities. Commit to tiny, repeatable acts, teaching once a week, caring for a garden, finishing books. Fidelity accumulates into identity. Cultivate projects with real feedback. Avoid purely symbolic goods, likes, followers. Build things that produce tangible results. Carpentry, coding, mentoring, practices where merit isn't performative. Build thick communities. Meaning is social. Seek groups with rituals, reliable norms, and the courage to disagree honestly. Institutions that survive test and adversity are a hedge against isolation. Learn amor fati, love of fate. Not resignation, active embrace. When possible, transform unavoidable suffering into mastery, skill building, narrative reframing. Use philosophy as therapy, not a religion. Interrogate beliefs, then choose practices that stabilize your life. Sleep, exercise, art, relationships. Philosophy diagnoses, embodied habits heal. Pick one constraint for 30 days, no social media before noon, 1 hour of reading daily. Measure effects on clarity and mood. Moral questions for those who want depth, not band-aids. If objective moral values don't exist, how do you justify courage? Hint: courage can be rooted in the commitment to projects and persons you value. If we create our values, what makes some values better than others? Answer: generativity, truth-seeking, the capacity to sustain life and flourishing. Does building value from scratch require solitude or community? Both. Creation needs reflection, validation needs others. Is it intellectually honest to live as if there is meaning? If yes, under what conditions? Pragmatic affirmation: live as if, because life wants to be lived well. How nihilism shows up in the culture now, and why it's louder than before. Digital irony and performative detachment reward. Linguistic cleverness while starving moral seriousness. Economic precarity, less stability, more atomic careers, undermines long-range projects. Identity fragmentation makes shared narratives weaker. Atomized subcultures substitute tribal meaning. Climate anxiety puts real limits on optimistic futurism, forcing a confrontation with mortality and planetary finitude. All this increases the social bandwidth for nihilistic moods. Yet, paradoxically, it also creates rare, fertile ground for new, life-affirming practices that are secular, pluralistic, and aesthetic. If climate collapse were guaranteed in your lifetime, what values would you double down on? Nihilism and ethics. Can we design a non-illusory moral life? Yes, but it requires honesty. If there's no cosmic author, ethics is not abolished. It becomes constructed and accountable. Criteria for good constructed values. Coherence. They must make sense together. Fecundity. They should generate life, not merely justify domination. Testability. They must stand against reality and consequences. Communicability. They must be persuadable by reasons, not coercion. This moves us from dogma to craft, moral engineering through feedback, science, art, and community. Sometimes philosophical nihilism is the language the exhausted use to explain their pain. Distinguish intellect from pathology. If your nihilistic insights produce paralysis, emptiness, insomnia, or suicidal ideation, treat them as clinical problems. Seek therapy, community, and embodied practice. Philosophy can guide, but sometimes the body needs medicine and the heart needs companionship before ideas can help. Final reflections. A short manifesto for the thinking soul. Face the abyss, don't romanticize it. Lucidity is a necessary cruelty. It cuts illusions but opens possibility. Choose creation over mere critique. Nihilism clears the table. You still must cook the meal. Build tiny catastrophes into experiments. Make commitments you're willing to test and fail at. Failure reveals what matters. Honor limits. Aesthetic constraints free you from boredom. Narrowness cultivates depth. Be public with vulnerabilities. A shared project trumps solitary brilliance. Treat meaning as practice, not possession. Consistent small acts are the scaffolding of a meaningful life. Closing provocation for high IQ readers who prefer action to elegy. You can keep dismantling systems, brilliant, necessary work, but also ask, what will you build next? If you are a lucid mind, your moral obligation is twofold: to deconstruct illusions that harm and to co-create practices that produce durable human flourishing. That is the brave alternative to passivity. A final reflective assignment. Choose one public project you will commit to for 1 year that benefits others, teaching, building, caring. Write it down. Publish it. Accept accountability. If nihilism taught you to doubt everything, let your doubt become the raw material for a choice you will live with.